Hello, I'm stood in front of our row of cordon apple trees. Now these are supported on an arrangement of posts and wires. So these posts are quite new. We only put these in last year as part of the garden renovations. These are 4-inch softwood posts and we've given them a little lick of paint to match some of the other timber here. Now the previous posts were 3-inch timber. They were treated, but they'd suffered quite badly at ground level and needed to be replaced. Unfortunately, we've only done half the job. As you can see, we have a row of cordon pears here as well, and they still have the old posts and we need to replace those. So what we've done so far is just stick in some bamboo canes vertically, and we've lashed the stems of the main stems of the cordons to those canes just to give them a little bit of vertical support. We've already cut the wires, so they are freestanding now. Now they're not going to go far, they're quite well anchored, but I don't want to risk breaking any of those branches, so a little bit of extra support vertically is probably a good idea. Now if I show you the base of some of these posts, you can see why we have to replace them. So you can see we have a bit of a problem here. I really should not be able to stick the knife into the post that far, and this is all rotten here. So I don't know if there's any strength left in this. Not a lot. So we need to get these out and replace them. Now when we put these in, we didn't use concrete, we just dug the hole and then rammed the soil down hard around the posts, and I'm planning to do exactly the same again. Now of course you could use concrete, or you could empty a bag of post mix around each post and pour on a drop of water, and that will hold the posts in place very nicely. If you use a rapid set post mix, then in about half an hour to an hour, your posts are going to be pretty firm. Now we've never found it necessary to do that for this kind of post. It's not really going anywhere, there's not a huge strain on it. So all we're going to do is dig out these old posts. And we've got to make the holes a little bit bigger because these are 3-inch and we're replacing them with 4-inch. And then when they're in position, we're going to ram the soil down hard around the post, and that should firm it in enough to do this job. If there is any strain, it's taken up by the straining posts on either end. Now you can see the old straining post here. It's not doing a very good job because this one is also quite rotten down here. But this is the only one that's really taking any strain. And again, there's no need to concrete this one in here, I think. It just needs to be rammed down against some solid earth below. So the first thing we're going to do is replace the end posts. Now these are the new ones on the apples. And the important part is getting this brace post in the right place. That is a little bit of a fiddle, but these posts have not been cut yet, so we will excavate the hole for the main post and also for the brace, and then we'll line them up and figure out exactly where to make our cut. Now once that's done, I need to put a couple of coats of paint or some kind of sealer on the inside so that we don't get a problem with moisture running down the back here. When the two end posts are fixed in place, we can then string a line between them and get the intermediate post lined up. Now arrangements of posts and wires like this are fairly common. The one odd feature here is this rail we have on the top. I honestly can't remember what motivated me to put it there in the first place. It was quite a while ago, but it's actually turned out to be rather useful. So on the apple side, where the trunks are rather heavy, they do try to pull down the straining wires, and although we've got quite thick wire and it's quite tight, the vertical pull on those does displace them somewhat. So I've got some very stout canes supporting those trunks, and because of that horizontal bar at the top, I'm able to fix those in place so that they don't drop. Similarly here in the past, we've just added an extra tie or some support to a branch that's bearing a heavy crop or something like that. So I found that top rail quite useful. This original rail was made from a piece of 4x2, and we'll replace it with a 5x2 this time, just to give it a little bit more strength. So that's the job we're going to start tackling today. Now, we won't get it done today. It's quite a big job to get the posts out and then excavate the holes. Now, because we've already got the trees in place, we can't use a post hole digger to work those holes. So we're going to have to do it with trowels and scoop the soil out by hand. On the apples, it was also necessary to get in there with a wrecking bar and use that to loosen up the soil below when it starts getting particularly compact and stony. So this isn't an easy job to do, but it's one that I need to do and get it done soon, because these trees are due their winter pruning and they really do need a bit of a haircut this year. So I'm going to make a start by removing the top bar and then work on getting the end posts out ready to be replaced. So I've dug out the holes for the first vertical post and the first bracing post, and I thought I'd just show you how I'm setting that up. So to help me get this right, I've got a large square there. I found that so useful for so many jobs. I'm going to make sure it's oriented correctly with the use of the spirit level, and I will also ram this post down this way. I shall get a sledgehammer out in a moment and drive that as far as I can to make sure that it's really solid on the bottom and isn't going to move. Now at that point I can set this post to vertical, and I can mark on here where this needs to be cut. Now I'll cut that at 45 degrees on the chop saw. I can just about manage that with my chop saw. By cutting from both sides, it will go through here. Once that's done, I can paint this face up, put it back in the hole, and that will then determine exactly how this one is set. So this post will then be set so that it's vertical, but also positioned tight up against the cut face of this post. Now it can be a bit of a fiddle to set this up properly, but it's well worth taking a few minutes to get that right before filling those holes back in. I think I'm more or less deep enough in the ground there to get these posts quite solid without having to use concrete. At least I hope so. The soil is surprisingly heavy in this area of the garden. This is one of those places where I seem to have a seam of clay. Most of the soil is a sandy, silty mix, but there are a few spots in the garden where there are more clay particles, and this seems to be one of them. But it hasn't been too bad digging it out. It was a lot worse when we did the apples, and I think the soil was very dry and very hard at the time, so maybe the winter rain has been good for something. Well, it's a different story at the other end of the run. The soil here has very little clay in it. It is sandy and silty like the majority of the garden, but it's got a lot of stone in it, and these are making life quite difficult in trying to dig out for the posts. We've also had a slight setback removing the old bracing post. It was quite badly rotted, and it is snapped off at ground level. We were trying to just wiggle it a little bit to loosen it, and hopefully we could have pulled it out as we did at the other end. Now we've got to try and work our way around it, avoiding the tree roots and working our way around the stones to try and free this post up and get it out before we can open the hole up for the new one. So that's a bit of a setback. It would have been much easier if that post had just pulled out nicely as it did at the other end. So this part of the job is always a bit of a pain. These posts aren't great, to be honest. They're not a uniform thickness. The wood is twisted. It's not really very straight. And all of that, combined with the fact that I'm trying to stick it into a couple of old holes in the ground, mean that it doesn't line up perfectly well. And it's not quite as accurate as I'd like. But at the end of the day, we're in a kitchen garden, so it really doesn't matter that much so long as it's solid. Now I've got some 150mm screws here, which I will put in at an angle, something like that. And that will definitely hold this straining post in place. I'll put 2 in each post. I will be putting through a large size clearance drill, and that's important so that I can pull this post up tight. Strangely, the wrecking bar has become one of my most frequently used gardening tools. It says something about my method of gardening, I think. That's not too bad. With the soil rammed down nice and tight, this post is not going to move. Certainly not enough to cause any problems for the cordon. So on to the 2 intermediate posts, and both of them unfortunately have broken off at ground level. This post is particularly rotted. All of this material is soft and useless, but it's going to be rather difficult to get this old fella out now. So that's a pity. So it's another day, and we managed to get the old rotten posts out of the ground with a bit of effort, and the new ones are probably roughly where they need to be. So to line these up, I'm using the highly advanced tool of a piece of string. If you've got a laser level, this is the perfect time to get it out, but a piece of string will do fine. So I'm just going to run this between the 2 end posts. They've got a notch on it, you can't see on the other side, and that's to carry the top rail. So I'm just going to put them at the height of that notch, and this piece of string will let me line them up in this direction and also just get the heights right. You have to make a small allowance for the fact that the weight of the string will make it sag in the middle, but it's going to be close enough for the kitchen garden. Now, if you're not putting a top rail across, that's kind of normal, then it's not quite so important to line up the heights. But because we're putting a rail across down the whole length here, then we've got to get the heights reasonably accurate. This looks to be about an inch or so too tall. Just make sure the height's right this end. Nope, that's no good. That will not ram down. I've still got an inch to go, and now I've compacted the soil down the bottom, so that was a bad move, but right, out it comes. I've taken just a bit too much out. Oh. Yeah, that's going to do nicely. That one's perfect. Because I'm not setting these in concrete, I have to check this several times as I'm ramming the soil down around them, and you've got some opportunity each time to move it. The more you ram it round, the less it will move, so I just do that in a few iterations, and the post will be solid enough once I've finished, and over time it will settle even further. So the posts are all in place now. The next job is to measure the exact pitch of the post so that I can cut the top rails to the correct length. Over the course of the next few days I will give them a lick of paint, and when they're dry we'll fit those and be ready to put the wires on. The rails have now had a few coats of paint and they're ready to be fitted. I will just clamp them in place temporarily, drill some clearance holes in the right place, and then screw them up with some 80mm screws. Right, now the posts are in place, I can fix some wire. So what I've got here is a 3mm stranded galvanized wire. Now you could use a stainless steel wire, or you could use one of the solid fencing wires, one of the straining wires, and any of that would be fine. I've also got some barrel strainers. Now I will unwind these fully before I fit them, and these are going to allow me to keep the wire nice and tight. You want to unwind them fully to start with, so you've got the maximum amount of travel later on when you want to tighten them up. And these come in various sizes. You don't need anything too big for this job. So on the barrel strainer, we've got an eye at one end and a hook on the other. So I will connect the wire to the eye and then hook this over a vine eye in the post. Now these have left and right-handed threads, so that when you turn the barrel one way they both extend, and when you turn the barrel the other way they both pull in. So these are great for tensioning up wires on a post and wire system like this. So I'm going to be fixing the wire with these little clamps, and these are 3mm clamps to match the wire, and you can get 2 lengths of that through there, and you just nip up those nuts and that will hold the cable in place. You only really need one of these at each end, but I typically put 2 on. I'm sure the second one isn't actually necessary. These hold the wire really well. I've also got some of these little loops. Now these are called a thimble, and there's a channel in here that fits the wire. So when you put the wire through one of the eyes, instead of having to pull that tight and potentially kink the wire and weaken it, you use one of these thimbles, and that provides you with a very nice loop at the end, and it works as a strain relief so that you don't damage the wire here. So into the posts I will be screwing some vine eyes. So these are designed to fix into wood. You can also get some that you can hammer into walls. What I will do is put a very small drill through first, just as a little pilot hole. It will help screw this in more easily, and also help prevent the wood from splitting. So you can start these off by hand, twist them into the wood, and when it gets tight, you can stick a screwdriver or something else down through the hole and use that as a lever to wind these vine eyes in. And that's fine if you're doing just a few of them. If you've got quite a lot to do, then it's handy to have a tool to help you fit these in. And I've got one here. So this is designed specifically for putting vine eyes in. To be honest, it's not great because it slips all over the place, but if you're a little bit careful in how you use it, then it can really speed things up. One thing to be aware of is that although this is designed for vine eyes, when this arrived, these eyes wouldn't fit in it. The slot was too narrow, so I had to grind that out. It's fine if you've got some tool you can use to file or grind the slot out to fit, but if you don't, then it's well worth checking that the tool and the vine eye actually fit. My dad also knocked up years ago a little tool to do a similar job, and this is just made from a piece of copper pipe, a piece of hexagonal bar at the end, and just riveted together. And the end of the pipe has been squashed, and that just fits over the vine eye, and that works great as well. Obviously the copper is quite soft, so after a while you might need to tap it with a hammer back into shape, but really this tool has put hundreds of vine eyes in the past. So yeah, you can always improvise something like that if you've got a lot of them to do. So the first job is to pop the pilot holes in and then fix in the vine eyes in each of the 4 posts. Now I'm only going to put a wire in 3 positions because I'm not actually going to tie in the tree to the wire. I will fit a large bamboo cane to the wires, and I will tie the tree into that. So these wires are really only there to hold the cane in place. So 3 is more than adequate for that. I've also got this top rail that I can strap the end of the canes to, so I really don't need more than 3 wires. So that's the first job, pilot holes and then screw the vine eyes in. So these thimbles typically come with the end closed, and you need to open those up before you can get them over the eyes. So I'll just use a pair of pliers and a pair of cutters, go through there and just prise that open, and just enough to get over the eye of the straining bolt. So that's now much better. So I apologise for the sound of a strimmer if you can hear that in the background. That's probably going to go on for quite a while, so I've got to film through it, I'm afraid. So I've just cut some fairly chunky bamboo canes off of our rampaging bamboo plant, and I'm going to use these to support the trees. Now, if you look at the first one, you can see the old cane here, not that there's much strength left in this. So I'm just going to go along and cut the ties that are holding this cane to the tree, and then I'm going to insert a new cane to replace it. I think temporarily I will have to just put a little bit of string around this just to give the plant some support, because there's not a lot holding it up now I've started to cut those ties away. So I'll just tie that temporarily there, insert the new cane, and then I can clip the cane to the wires. I've got some fairly heavy duty tie wraps for that. So I'll clip the cane in 3 places to the wires, and then with a really chunky one I will clip it also to the top rail. So these cordons were initially laid out at 45 degrees, and I've got one of these large builder squares here, and I'll use that to give me an idea of where they ought to be. They have undoubtedly sagged over the years, and especially now that the supporting wires, the original wires, have been removed. So the only thing that's holding these up are these temporary vertical canes to which we've lashed the stems in places. And of course I'm going to remove those as soon as I've got the plants tied in properly. I don't know whether we'll be able to lift them back up to 45 degrees or if we'll have to settle for them being a little bit lower than that, but I'll do my best to get them back where they ought to be. Now I've got a slight problem down here, because this lower horizontal branch, which has been used just to fill in a bit of this empty space, that was being supported by one of the old wires, which was a lot lower down. I've only got 3 wires on here now, and I had more before, so I'll have to think of some way to support this in due course. So what I'm using to tie in the trees to the new canes is this hollow rubbery material, and this makes fantastic ties, especially for fruit trees. Because it's got so much stretch to it, it won't girdle the trunk if you forget to loosen a tie. What I will do as well is I will tie first to the cane a couple of times and put a double knot between the cane and the trunk of the tree, and that will just make sure that there's no rubbing there. That's even more important if you're tying into wires directly, to put some of this soft material between the wire and the trunk so that you don't have the bark rubbing. I really am sorry for the racket in the background. I have no idea what they're doing, but it's obviously something involving heavy machinery. Right, so that's the first one done. It's now tied in. I probably need to put a couple more ties in just to secure it nicely. Now I've got to do the same all the way down the row, so cut out the old supports and try and thread a new cane into place and tie it back in. It's a bit of a fiddle, but shouldn't take too long. As usual, that took a lot longer than I'd anticipated, and it's taken a few days to find a break in the weather to come out and finish it off. But the job is done now. So there they are. They're aligned more or less how they should be, and when I get a moment I will get on with the winter pruning. Now there were two of these that I think I would really like to get rid of at the end of this season, and there are two others that I'm not that happy with. They produce quite a lot of fruit, but the fruit isn't that good. I'm planning to pay a bit more attention to watering this year, especially for those two. But if they don't produce something decent this year, I think they ought to go as well. So of the 9 trees we've got here, 4 are a little bit dodgy. So I think even though it can be difficult to replace these trees because of replant disease and other problems, I think I'm going to give that a go if they don't produce something good this year. So they're on borrowed time. The others though produce lots of very good fruit. We had a bumper crop last year, so that might mean we get a rather lesser crop this year, but there appear to be quite a few fruit buds, so I'm hopeful of getting some good pears later in the year. So that's all for this video. I will return to the cordons when I do the pruning. But for now, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.